All right, we got a little lost there with the signal flow. It's all very complicated. So let's put the mixer away for a sec, go back to our tracks, and I'm going to show you the next very important feature of kind of bringing some life to your instruments in Logic, and that's called automation. So automation A, again, Logic very intuitive with their keystrokes, brings up this kind of grayed out window that lets you adjust whatever parameters you want, the same parameters that you opened in your plugins, but over time. So if you have a video background and you've been working in like Adobe Premiere, these are basically keyframes. You could choose one location for one parameter and another location for the same parameter, and over time have that parameter change for you. So you don't have to like sit there and actually change it to get that effect that you want. You could just let the program do it for you, and you basically draw the curves. So the parameter I'm choosing to apply is volume, and volume is basically deactivated on every channel until you click somewhere and actually activate it. So I'm gonna affect volume right now, but usually in your travels you never want to automate your volume, at least on the volume knob itself, because this is linked to your fader. So if I wanted the keyboard player to be louder at the end of my mix, it doesn't matter, because as soon as I press play, it's going to read that automation that we told it to and snap it back to its value that I assigned it. So read, touch, latch, and write, I'll get into those in a second. But basically, if it's reading automation, it doesn't matter what I do with this fader. It's just going to go right back to where it was. Again, demonstration. No matter what I do with this fader, at least the volume knob, if I press play and it's reading the automation data, it's going to snap back to negative 0.5. So automating volume doesn't really help you. What I would do, though, is open a compressor, take the threshold to 0, turn the ratio to 1, so nothing's actually happening. Or better yet, I don't know if this will work, but basically you want a plugin open with nothing active. You could do it in the EQ if you want, but now I would automate this value, or the output gain of the compressor or something that gives you a means of adjusting the volume overall and that you could use for your automation, but that isn't linked to your fader on the main screen, if that makes sense. Because you want to have access to that later down the line if you choose to change something. You could always change it by, selecting all your automation and changing it there, but it gets a little dicey when you're trying to change a bunch of automation at the same time. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to double click these to deactivate them on the channel. Now we're working with audio files, and the only automation that you have access to on an audio files are going to be your main window, which is the volume, the pan, the solo, and the mute. I would avoid solo because it's a little choppy in Logic. It doesn't exactly get the timing right. Mute's a little better. And then the sends that you have access on the channel, by the way, absolute, it's just fine for these. I don't really know what relative does, and I don't know anyone who uses it. So the 3 sends that we have designed active on the channel, if I add a 4th send here and send it to a different place, now I'll have access over the 4th send that I just made. And then the effects, or the audio effects that you have linked on the channel. So remember the channel EQ that we opened that has a high cut frequency, which we went over, a low cut frequency. All these peaks are your bells. Each of these have a Q factor. Each of these have a frequency. Each of them have a gain. And then you have like a shelf gain, and then you have an overall master gain. So every parameter that you have access to modifying in this window, you also have access to modifying in this window. So let's just open the high cut frequency here. Put this away for a sec, and now I'll change it from 20,000 Hertz, which is the topmost parameter, the topmost value, and over time change it to 0. So now as we scrub through our track here, you'll see the high cut frequency automatically going down over the course of the track. Let's hear what that sounds like. Kind of spooky, kind of really cool. And then if you change the secondary tool to an automation curve tool, hold command here, and now you could change the envelope of how it actually messes with the shape of the sound. So if I wanted to kind of dip down halfway through, a lot of power there, a lot of control This is just one parameter, you know, just the high cut. Let's do the same thing here on the channel EQ for the low cut. Now if I wanted to have two active at the same time, I just hit this little bottom arrow and create a little bit more space for myself in the window. The low cut's going to start at 20 hertz, and I'll have it end up at, 20,000. I'll do the same thing here. Maybe I'll have them meet in the middle. I'll do 500 there. I'll do 500 here. So now these two curves are kind of closing in at the same time. So maybe I want that there, and then I have it come back in. Oops, 20,000. So that's automation that we're writing right now. And I'm writing it because I'm using this little pencil tool and this shaper tool to put it actually in the track. But I could also change this to touch, latch, or write. Basically, the difference between these, I'm not going to call them algorithms, these tools, is touch is going to basically, wherever I leave off, I'll play the track, and I'll keep this here. And then I'll change it to here, and you'll see it's actually writing the automation. As soon as I let go, it's going to go back to its original value. Right? Is it? Latch. Let's see, because I maybe get these two confusing. I maybe have confused these two. So latch, I think we'll leave it at the value that you let go at. So if I let go at 9.6 here, it's just going to live there for the whole time. I think touch, if I go to write more automation, yeah, so as soon as I let go, it snaps back down to 9.6 because I'm only touching it for a second before it goes back to where it was. Latch, it'll latch on to the last, like the most recent place that you left off. And then write is basically how you record. Oh, it's going to bring up a window for me to click here. It's going to say warning, write mode erases multiple parameters in one go without touching anything. In most cases, it's better to use latch or touch because write basically writes automation on every single parameter in every single plugin. So if you have multiple plugins active that you're writing automation for, it'll record over those. So it's a great way to make mistakes, basically. So read will just read the automation that's active. Touch will modify it temporarily and then snap it back. And then latch will leave off where you left it. And this is just EQ. You could do the same with compression, all these parameters in compression. And then if you have distortion, if you have reverb, if you have some auto filters, if you have some modulation like a tremolo or like a phaser, all these other plugins that we didn't quite get into in this section, delays, amps, all of this stuff. You could modify every single parameter on every single plugin. It's one of the most powerful tools that Logic has to offer you, and you should 100% experiment on your own time. Yeah.